All right, everyone. We're going to keep it going here. Can't believe this thing's already coming close to being over, but let's make sure we stay dialed in here. Really excited to introduce our next guest, Steve Thompson from USA Hockey, manager of goaltending development since 2019. In 2015, I took my first trip over to Finland to learn more about goaltending development. And I had written a book about the experience, and I was pretty honest about the state of goaltending development in the USA at the time. And I was always really interested in who was going to be the next guy to lead American goaltending into the next stage of success. And I was so excited when USA Hockey announced that Steve was the guy that was going to take over, because his passion for learning, like I've said since the beginning, some of the best goalie coaches are the best learners. But not only does he have to continue to learn, but he has to take what he learns and then synthesize all that information for the whole country, right? And that's a daunting task when you think about the size and the cultures and how spread out everything is. So Steve has done an absolutely amazing job in his role since 2019 and has really pushed American goaltending to the next level. So take it away and keep up the great work.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to all of you. It was so exciting when Tomas sent me the list of all the different countries that were here to participate. I think so much of the growth that we've all made collectively, globally, has been due to how much we're willing to share. And I know I really respect the relationship that I've had with Tomas over the past 6 years and with so many of you in the room. And I say this all the time, and I firmly believe this. We're all on team goaltending. Maybe 364 days out of the year, and then that one day that our countries head and face each other, then we're rooting for our home countries, as we all should. But I just have never subscribed to that. Let's keep these secrets, because if I share this, then we're not going to win the big game. I just think all the goalies win when we get to share, and we all learn so much in that process of sharing that information. And that's what tonight's going to be about, this afternoon's going to be about, is Tomas wanted us to speak about some of the things that we're currently working on at USA Hockey Goaltending. And to be honest, he asked, what's new since the last time I spoke to so many of you, which was at the World Junior event in Gothenburg. And I told him, there's really not that much new, kind of to what Justin was talking about. We're still trying to chip away at this environment-based learning, and we're trying to kind of synthesize it so that the goalie coaches across our country feel like they can take that next step. And so I'll put you through a workshop that we've been trying to put on in all the different states, because this has been a tough journey. I think many of us have been in this together, where we learned a certain way, we had success, and then we want to teach that way because we have, experience in that field. But now we're starting to see this next generation of coaching, and it's challenging. A lot of the things that we're currently working on are things that were completely backward to the way that we developed ourselves. And so I'm hoping by the end of today we'll have a framework that we can lean on and some new drills that we can all take back to our rinks and apply right away and see if it can create more efficiency for the goalies we're working with. And then another big takeaway hopefully should be, depending on how much game time the goalies you're working with have, maybe your training structure is going to look a little bit different. So we're not just cookie cutter into everything that we do. And so we'll start with that today, this player-centered environment. In my opinion, this has been the biggest change in the last decade. When I stepped on college campus for the first time, I was giving a strength routine that was the same for every single player on the roster. When I jumped on the ice with my goalie coach, I was given the same drill set that every goalie on the roster had. No matter how different our body types were, how different our skill sets were, if you were going to be a good teammate, you did the same thing, because that's what it meant to be a team. And I really think what's changed is we started to identify the different values that all of our teammates have and the different needs that we all have. And I'm hopeful that the next generation of goalie coaching will be very specific to what our goalies need, what their pros are, what their cons are, how we can support all of those. And again, we'll jump into some framework to support that theory. But I want to start by having you all reflect on your own team. So if you work with an individual team, this will be what we use for this exercise. If you are a private goalie coach, think about a few goalies that you have coming back this summer that are maybe playing high school and higher hockey, and think about how many goalies are on that roster. And take note of that. And then of those goalies on your roster, how often are each of them playing? And maybe give a rough percentage to what that game time allocation would be. Next, do these goalies have a skills coach on staff? Maybe that's you if you're working with that individual team. If you're thinking of a client this summer, do they have a goalie skills coach that's with them throughout the season? Do they have a private skills coach back home? And then how often are they communicating with that private skills coach back home? And so hopefully all of us here can see where we fit into this puzzle. But I think these are some of the questions amongst many more that we need to start thinking about when we're trying to come up with individualized plans for our goaltenders, knowing that the answers to these questions are going to change what we need to work on and how often we need to work on it. And so we'll start with this training environment. I think Heather Mannix, did everyone see Heather's presentation?
No, we didn't.
Okay, so this will be new information for some. If you were with us in Gothenburg for the World Junior last winter, then this will look familiar. It'll be a little bit of a refresher. But this is what we've been trying to use to help us better understand how complex the environments are that we're putting our goalies through. And so we'll start kind of in that bottom left-hand corner. You're going to see it's very high in technique, very low in complexity. And then in that top right corner would be very high in tactical emphasis and much more complex. And this is kind of the framework that we're trying to work within. And so we'll start with unopposed practice. Just your goalies and you, right? So this is often where we see maybe these free skates, whether it's in the crease or around the rink. This would be an example of unopposed. It's just the goalie versus themselves. I would say puck handling is another area that I see a lot of this. And I believe Dave spoke on this a little bit yesterday. Even in this example, it's unopposed. There's no pressure. There's not many reads in decision making. It's just kind of working on the technical skill of puck handling or edge work. So you can kind of see they're very high in technique, very low in complexity. So we go up on this ladder now to opposed practice. So 1 to 2 players on the opposition, much like many of the goalie skates that we run. 1 or 2 players, goalie working on some skills. A little more complex than the previous example. There's a little bit more decision making to be had. Maybe you're reading the release, maybe you're having to read the other options, making reads off of the rebound. But still very heavy in technique, not a whole lot of tactical emphasis, not a ton of decision making. Moving up to small unit play. An opportunity to work on patterns that we see often in the game, but we can't always know that they're going to take place in the game. You have no control over how many goal line attacks your goalies are going to see in a game, but you know you want to work on that, so now you can build patterns in your practice to get those reps, knowing, I think someone spoke about it this morning, you can have an entire season, as Steve was talking about that, from one goal against to the next time that same exact scenario takes place, that could be years. But in practice, maybe we can simplify things to make sure that there are more looks to give your goalies the confidence that when they do see that in a game. So here, general example, we see this all the time with some of our rush plays. So we're not going to spend a ton of time in the defensive zone or the offensive zone. We're going to make sure that we go from one rush to the next. So we're really focusing on the neutral zone, we're really focusing on the rush, all the reads that come with that. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit more tactical emphasis there, a lot more players involved. 2 small-sided games. So now we're going to take the constraints away. They can play hockey and do whatever they want to do, what they need to do, but maybe we're going to shrink the ice down so that it's happening faster than normal. Maybe we're going to have less players involved. And those are all going to change the different reads and the looks that we're having our goalies see. So here would be 3-on-3 from the top of the circles down. A lot more tactical emphasis. There's no rules. The players just are trying to score the goal. But because of the space we've put them in, odds are it's going to be a lot of low-high plays, probably going to be lots of reads through the crease, a lot of competing at the net front. So there's more variance, but we can contain that a little bit based on the ice that we're giving them access to. And then lastly, the top rung on this ladder would be the game. It has the most tactical emphasis. It's the most complex version of training that we have. And like we talked about, there's lots of great things about the game, and this is ultimately what we're testing our goaltenders on, but there are times that there's going to be a situation, whether it's a goal against or a save, that you may never see this exact scenario in a game, but years in between, right? So it's really hard to get all the repetitions we need for learning to take place if we just played games. There's a reason why we don't just play hockey every day, and there's a reason coaches exist. But we have to make sure that we're managing this ladder well and spending time on all the rungs and not just focusing on the ones that are most convenient for us. So now I want to get back to this game playing concept. So I looked at Division I minutes for both men's and women's hockey, and I want to just give you some perspective on what those goaltenders are seeing from minutes played. So the starting goalie average time is 72% on the men's side of the game. So that one athlete is getting 72% of game time amongst the 3 or 4 goalies on the roster. And the highest was 97%. There was Maine, there was a few other teams that more or less one goalie played the entire season. Maybe the other goalie got in for a cup of coffee, but it wasn't much. On the women's side, there was actually even more discrepancy. The starter averaged 74%, and the highest was 99%. And so again, you can think about this ladder and where these athletes are playing. If we look from a minutes perspective, those starting goalies, those individuals on each of the team, they're getting the bulk of those minutes, and a lot of that training is taking place in that top right corner. They're getting lots of tactical emphasis. It's really complex. And then the goalies that aren't playing those minutes, the other 3 to 4, if you think about what we do for those goalies, so you have your pregame skate, you have your goalie stay on after practice. What are we working on? In that framework, where are we spending the majority of our time? That bottom left, right? We're seeing so much of the unopposed training, so much of the 1 to 2 players. It's so technique heavy. The one thing that they need is more time of that tactical emphasis. And the one thing we provide to try and prepare them for when they finally get their call and they're ready to go, and we don't give them what they need. And if you think about summer training, you take it even further. You have some goalies that you work with that played 2 games all winter. They watched hockey the majority of the time. They did a lot of technique training with their goalie coach there. And then you get them back for the summertime, and you spend from now until August working on technique to prepare them for hopefully them playing some minutes when they really need that tactical emphasis. And are we exacerbating this problem by trying to prepare them for the real game, but yet only training them on technique? And so my question is, can we change the way that we've always worked with our teams? Maybe we invert our inter-squad scrimmages where you know your starting goalies are getting lots of tactical training in the games that they're playing, and they're playing a lot of them. So then when you're in your practice and you're running a team scrimmage, should your goalies who aren't playing those minutes in the game be the ones that are seeing the bulk of those minutes, knowing that it's the tactical and the reads that they need? And then the reality is that your starting goalies probably need to work on their technical emphasis. I had a good conversation with Alfie Michaud 2 days ago. I'm not sure how many of you know Alfie. He's at the University of Maine. Great goalie coach. And after talking about this concept, he was reflecting on at Maine this year, when the season ended, he went over every goal against at the end of the year just to kind of see the patterns of how everything's went. And he recognized that early in the season, before it started, he was really heavy in the technique. He was really working on stick work and hands and rebound control, all those little details. And as the season progressed, his coaching methods were, well, let's watch the game back, let's see some patterns in play, and let's create situations in practice that replicate the situations in the game. So it's very heavy in technical or tactical emphasis. They make it to the NCAA tournament, and he recognizes that his goalie's hands, stick work, all those technical details had gone out the window because he had spent so much time focusing just on the tactical emphasis that his starting goalie hadn't been thinking about the technical detail that was needed. And then I would say many times that you think about this, it's the converse that we've already talked about, where it's your backup goalies who need all that tactical work, but aren't getting any of it because we bring them out with the 2 other scratches and we work on all that technique. So something to think about. I don't know if that's the exact answer. I know that time is money for all of us, and it's hard for us to get our head coaches to buy into these systems of maybe some of your deeper bench players owning some of these minutes. But I'm hopeful that if we present it in a specific way that makes sense, that they will see the value in it, and that we can get our goalies what they need when they need it. Yes?
I think even at the NHL, I was watching a game with the Oilers, and they were talking about how Stuart Skinner maybe needed a reset because he's playing so much that he's not getting that technical time in net, and that's why maybe struggled a little bit more in the playoffs there.
Sure.
I think Brian Boucher was talking about that.
Yeah, it's hard to say because we're not living in the day-to-day of what they're getting. But I think as long as we're more mindful of the fact that there are these different steps on the ladder to work on and making sure that we are hitting them and we understand which of those goalies need, then we're going to be in a better spot. So what I want to do now is I'm going to have everybody take their sheet of paper and hand it to their neighbor. So give your drill to a friend.
I didn't do one, so you wouldn't that way.
Is that a watch here or what?
Okay. So you're going to have some time to briefly describe your drill to your partner if it doesn't make a lot of sense. But the end game is that once you understand what's taken place, you're going to come up to this board and you're going to put a dot on this framework of where you think their drill is, from very technique centered to very tactical in emphasis. Okay? So if we look at this board for everybody that can see it, we've got some great diversity here, and I think this is a testament to all of you and the great work that you do. There's probably a reason that all of you are here for what you do back home. I would say historically, when I'm seeing drills back in the United States, that's a really heavy part of where I'm seeing training. It's a lot of unopposed work. It's a lot of 1 to 2 players. I do know the logistics of having extra shooters makes things challenging. You have to lean on other people to be there. It sometimes makes it hard for us to manage when there's, especially when we're working with youth, some kids that are kind of being knuckleheads between drills. If you go to tell the goalie something, all of a sudden they're punching each other and now you're trying to babysit. It makes life tough to have extra people there. And I think that's why a majority of our training looks in that bottom left-hand corner. The other thing that we do often is, based on finances, we build small spaces. It's a lot more affordable for us to have a little lab that we only have to keep frozen here instead of the entire ice sheet. So the economics plays a role on us doing more technique-centered work. Big ice sheet costs a lot of money. Having extra people costs a lot of logistics. There's some barriers we have to jump. So I think we're managing that pretty well in our goalie skills work. And then I would say for that 74% of our goalies that are playing the majority of the minutes, they're getting a lot of that tactical work. But the area that I think we can all get better at if we're going to move the needle and have our goalies performing better is within this small unit play and small-sided games. Can we make sure that we are a part of our practice design? And much like you talked about this morning, not just the goalie coach that comes in for the first 20 minutes, works on some technique, wipes our hands clean, and then goes on to our next private lesson. Can we be a part of practice design? Can we make sure that those minutes after our 20 minutes of skills work, we're still bringing something to the table and just creating a better practice for our athletes? And so we'll shift to some elements of good practice. You may have seen this in the past as well, but just some things we want to try and make sure that all of our practices have so that our goalies have the highest fidelity training possible. And number one is we want to make sure that they're constantly making decisions. If our goalies aren't thinking and making decisions, then they're going to look great, technique, but tactics are going to be out the window and they're probably not going to perform well when the game starts. We want to make sure that we have quality repetitions. I know in our country, we paraded around since 2011 saying that get as many shots as possible. Time is money. Make sure every single kid's moving. There's a lot of pressure for our youth coaches to have as many repetitions as humanly possible, and that's how they measured success. And what that's turned into is our goalies are just getting peppered in practice now. And if you watch a 10U practice in our country, it's like 7,000 shots in a space this big. And kids are waving the white flag saying, get me out of here. I'd rather score 700 goals than do the alternative. So it's not about as many reps as possible. It's about as many quality reps as possible. Let's give these goalies what they need. Easier said than done, but it's something we need to fight for. Next, it has to look like the game. There has to be some connection. It doesn't have to mimic it exactly, but our goalies need to see connection that I'm working on this because eventually it's going to make me better in the game. And if they get that buy-in, they're with you. But if they just think you're doing this really abstract drill that has no context to what they actually need to do, then you're going to lose them. And I think some drills are better at that than others. But if we can get the buy-in, then we're going to see a lot better performance. And then lastly, we have to challenge them appropriately. For our starting goalies, our higher performing goalies, we need to make sure they're not getting bored. It can't be too easy. But our developing goalies, we also can't overwhelm them to the point where they're not even sure why they're there. And it's going to be different for everyone. We need to treat them differently and protect our beginning goalies and maybe stack the deck against our better goalies. So I want to go over some consistent pitfalls. Number one would be multiple pucks. I see this all the time. I see it in our goalie skills work. If you think about, a lot of us like to work on rebound control. So we'll put spotted pucks to the weak side of the ice, and you make a save on one puck, and then there's a fake puck over here that we move into, and we get a lot of consistent reps at weak door plays, or weak side plays. But the reality is that when you shoot a puck, what makes this hard is knowing if it hits my blocker, it's going to bounce this way. And if it's bouncing, that player is going to have to collect the puck before they shoot it. And they're likely to put it in this corner because of the environment. It's not just pushing to the far post. And if we're constantly using spotted pucks on the back door, our goalies are going to get the technique and the mechanics to get there, but they're not going to have the brain to anticipate all the details of the reads that actually take place in a game. And I would encourage all of you, just take a deep breath. Understand that you might only get 3 that look the way that you wanted them to originally, but that all those other reps when the puck didn't go the exact way that you hoped, that's still a game-like rep. That's still a read for your goaltender. Even though they didn't get to the back door the way that you hoped, they put it into the corner, and they didn't need to because they controlled the first one, and that's okay. It might take a little bit longer to get there, but we're confident that your goalies will be better for that longer-term process instead of just rushing for as many reps as possible and stealing all the decision-making along the way. Another thing we see in team practice is something like this, where shot from the goal line, there's another spotted puck at the blue line, then it's the other corner. And again, I don't know if we see this in all countries, but we still see this a lot in the United States. At all levels. I see a lot of Division I college practices that look like this. And think about it from the goal scoring perspective. Player doesn't care to stop and score the rebound because he's got to get ready to be the screen for the second shot. And now both the player and the goalie don't care about the puck in the slot because they got to get ready for the goal line attack. And we're promoting the wrong habits. We get to a game, we wonder why the player didn't stop at the net front and hit the rebound. We wonder why the goalie didn't cover it up. But yet in practice design, we've been encouraging them that the next rep is more important than the current rep. We're never playing pucks out. So this would be an example of a similar drill with one puck. And now we can see that the puck is determining the next play, not the pattern that we came up with. Everyone's now working on competing on these rebounds. Better for goal scorers and goaltenders. Exactly. There's never 2 pucks in a game, yet we love to have so many in our practices. It's not perfect. I think every drill we can improve upon, but it's a step in the right direction where the proper decisions are being made because the puck said so, not because the adults on the ice said so. Next would be sharing too much information. This is another thing that I see often in all of teaching. Before our drill starts, we say puck's going to be in the corner. They're going to drive the goal line. They're going to fake the shot. I want you to hold your edges. I want you to push to the far post. I want you to seal the ice. I want you to control your rebound. Then the drill starts. Player drives the net, fakes the shot. She holds her edges, pushes the post, makes a save. Life is good. I'm a good goalie coach because she did what I said and we saw it. She's a great goalie because she made the save. We all can be happy. But then the game starts. Now we have a new goal line attack when it actually matters. And the game's over. We're frustrated as coaches. We've been working on goal line attacks all week. Why didn't you stop that puck? They're frustrated as athletes because, what the heck, we've been working on this all week. Why didn't I know what to do? But when we script out every single play and tell our goalies exactly what the reads are, they're not reading. They're just listening and mimicking what you've asked them to do. It would be no different than us having a math test. I show you all the answers, and then I give you the test, and you write down all the answers, and I feel proud as a teacher that you got 100%. You feel proud as a student. The reality is there was no learning that took place. I just showed you everything you needed to know, and then passed you the test on how to do it. And I think a lot of our goalie training currently looks like this. We have to hide more information that's critical for them not to know to make the reads. And that's where I asked, does American football have it right? So for those that are familiar or not familiar with American football, they'll have an offensive coordinator. And they'll explain the constraints and the expectations to the offensive players on the team. So they know what they need to know, but they don't know what the defense is up to, because then they would make different decisions. They wouldn't have to make the reads in the real situation. That's what the defensive coordinator is there for. They share with the defense what the expectations are and what their rules are, but they don't tell them what the offense is going to do. So now when they're running through drills, they know just enough to make sure that it flows correctly, but not so much that they're making reads based off of the rules. I think you've all seen this often when you work on special teams. I remember some of the forwards always complaining that the PK was winning in our special teams day because the PK knew exactly what our PP systems were. And they'd be like, oh, this isn't fair. Like, we already knew what we were going to do. Can we get away from that so that we don't always know what's going to take place? The other thing that football does, they have a practice squad. They have a whole group of people that are just there to play against the team. And they'll mimic the systems of the next week opponent. So on Sunday, if I'm playing your team, my practice squad is pretending to be your team so that my real team can play my practice team and get those reps in. Could that give our goaltenders the opportunity to get those tactical moments in the practice squad games, so that in the real games, although they're not getting that tactical emphasis, they're getting it somewhere? Again, some logistical hurdles to jump, but something to think about. Next would be the converse of the former, in that if we are going to take on this defensive coordinator concept and start sharing points with our goalies in practice, I don't know if we're necessarily doing that currently in hockey. Where we'll go back to this drill here, where often what I see in team practice is the players are given what the point of emphasis are and what they're doing well, what they can improve next time. They're having some reflection as they come back to the line after the reps are over, but often the goalies are just thrown in net. And they're just told, your job is to stop the puck. And so the goalie goes in the net and just competes, and then they come out and they wait for their goalie partner to go. And there are no points of emphasis for that goalie to focus on. There's no reflection with an adult afterward to review what they can do better next time that they go in the net. And I think that's where maybe all of us can do a better job in team practice and being engaged in practice design, being engaged in the drills. I see a lot of goalie coaches, there's bumping elbows and shooting the shit with the assistant coaches once practice starts. It almost feels like it's social hour now because I got my 20 minutes of work done. And can we be better? Can we do more? So maybe we're making reads off the puck. Maybe we're, point of emphasis, defending pucks through the crease. It doesn't matter what you come up with. The point is, let's give them a couple things to think about. And then when they come out of the net, share some ideas, and then let them reapply that new information in their next set and see how much further that learning can go. And then the final one here would be training shorthanded for a player advantage game. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know the best way to word this, but I was at a different conference last week and they were talking about rugby and how when they would measure how often people would pass the ball in rugby in practice, in a real game they would often practice, or they would actually pass the ball when they were in a shorthanded situation. But yet in their practices, they were always passing the ball at even strength. And so their practice design wasn't representative of what the actual game was needing them to work on. And it made me think about our goalie training. If you look at all of the drills that you have, maybe you can do the same game, but at least of the two that I showed as an example today, it was the goalie versus 3 shooters, right? So they're severely shorthanded. And I think I see this a lot. I'm not sure if you all would say the same. But yet, of the 2 game situations that we showed, they had an advantage. It was actually 3 jerseys, in this case, blue jerseys versus white, or on the other, blue versus white on both sides, 4 versus 2. And so the challenge and the question is, no team would train penalty kill all day long and expect the teams to perform in 5-on-5. There's different cues, there's different needs, there's different reads. But yet in our goalie training, we're constantly training shorthanded, and then we wonder why they're not having success when it's even strength or even when they have a man advantage. And so if you think about the different cues, in our training session with the 1 versus 3 model, the puck, and sometimes plural, is your cue. You're making a lot of reads off the pucks. The script that the coach gave you ahead of time is a lot of what your cues are, and then the opposing players. But what you're missing when you don't have more players and more complexity, you're missing out on the communication cues. You're missing out on the defender and their positioning and how their positioning is going to affect your decision making, the patterns of the game. Those are all the things that I think we're really losing touch with by always creating that shorthanded environment. And so for this is the first year we did this, but I just got back from our World Junior and Women's National Team goalie camp. Historically, we only brought our goalies in I know Maria and some of them have been to this camp. This year we brought our D Corps in as well. So instead of being a goalie camp, it was a defensive zone camp. So that now we're making reads off of the D, and we're talking about systems in the defensive zone. We're not just working on the technique. We want to make sure that that entire defensive core feels comfortable with what we're trying to get done. And then so we'll see how this goes. This is the first year. I'm hopeful we'll continue to do this, but that's our attempt at trying to broaden the spectrum of what we're teaching with our goalies. Okay, so I think that is it for what I have time for. So what I'll ask you to do is if you can quickly make some notes on the drill that you have in front of you and how these things are in there, whether it was good and they're doing that well, or whether there are some ideas that you have to improve some of these elements. And then if you can hand that drill back to them, then they'll have that for future use.